So we'd like to next invite Greg Hesse, who's our convener for C2.
Thanks, Angela, and good afternoon, everyone, for what will be my last round of presentations to this esteemed group. My name's Greg Hesse. I've been had the pleasure of being the convener of C2 for the last 6 years now. So the scope of C2, and C2 is somewhat unique amongst the C-grade panels in that our scope is not limited simply to the technical, but also considering the human resource and institutional aspects around the secure and economic operation of power systems. And given the transition underway, that is becoming increasingly important as to how we prepare the controller in the control room to deal with the power system of the future. It will be very different to what we've had in the past. The pathways into the control room will no doubt look very different. The tools in the control room will be very different, and the people will be doing a very different job, I suspect. C2 structure, unlike perhaps some of the mega groups like B1 and B4, C2 is fairly compact in terms of its working group activities. Our study committee chair, Jamie from Brazil, does a sterling job, along with Flavio, our secretary. Our working groups are structured around the themes. The green is the real-time system operation and control. The orange is the system operational planning and performance analysis. The yellow is around that control centre infrastructure and the human resources for system operation, and strong emphasis on joint working groups as well, quite often with C5, C4, a relatively new one now with B4, again picking up on Christian's theme around offshore and the impact of offshore wind connections and so on, and how that impacts power system operation. And we'll talk a bit more about some of the activities of the working groups in a little bit. 2023, so we had a couple of working groups come to conclusions. The power system restoration, accounting for the rapidly changing power system and generation mix, that working group C226, which was convened by our very own Babak here. I think he completed the work in record time just about, I think. It was very prompt from start to finish. And a second technical brochure around WAMPAC systems and the decision support for system operators. Things like synchrophases, PMUs, whatever you want to call them. Marvellous tools, great for post-event analysis. One of the critical questions we'll always ask is, what is the killer application in the control room? So they're great to look at, the data, but what is it that's going to tell the controller to do something different to what he or she otherwise would have? And that's where we really need the technology to step up and support that decision making in control rooms. Several tutorials, webinars, etc. during the year. The current working group C242, looking at machine learning and AI. So partway through their work, and they took the opportunity to present the results of their survey on the growing use of machine learning and AI in control centre applications. 2 tutorials at the CAN Symposium. Risk of fire starts. Frank Kriski from SA Power Networks had finished his working group and presented on that tutorial, and Babak's working group as well. In terms of the CAN Symposium, C2 we had 29 papers, wasn't quite the biggest number. I know C4 pipped us, one of them might have been slightly ahead of us, but we presented over 6 sessions, and even at about 4:30 p.m. on the very last afternoon of the week, we were able to still have over 100 people attending the paper session. So there's key themes about how are we operating the power system now, and how are we going to support that energy transition, and what further tools and systems do we need to keep it secure and reliable into the future. Because of course we need to keep operating the current system we have today as we transition. We don't have the luxury of building a whole new power system in parallel and then just cutting over from one to the other. As you've probably heard me say before, we need to rebuild this plane while we're still flying it. Some of the major contributions, I mentioned those 2 tutorials. I know the power system restoration tutorial was standing room only. You can see the wide panorama shot, very well attended. Both tutorials were and generated a lot of discussion. In terms of our recently formed working groups, C244 is around operational strategies to manage power system minimum operating conditions, and I'm the convener of that working group. And this is really built around the recognition that in the changing nature of the power system, in the past when we got into operational difficulties, often it was around meeting maximum demands or high fault levels or things like that. Things that, as much as it really pained us to do, you knew if you did get into a whole heap of trouble, you could load shed your way out of the problem. When you're faced with minimum demand, minimum inertia, minimum fault level, you can't do that. So what are those strategies? If we can't wait for Christian and the guys to go and invest in something new that'll be here in 5 years to help fix our problem, when Chart gets the phone call on a Sunday afternoon that something odd is happening on the power system, what are the operational strategies? So what is the goal of this working group is, what are people doing? What have we learnt so far? What are the things we can deploy here and now in the control room to help us manage some of these situations as we go forward? And the second year working group is a follow-on from some previous work around low inertia power systems. So more detail around how you can get better insights into that evaluation, estimation and provision of power system inertia. Some of the discussion we had around new working groups. Resilience, I know, is a topic that keeps coming up time and again. So what are some of those operational resilience indices? What are the measures you can use in real time as to how close are we to the edge? How resilient is our network, our power system right now? Cyber security, I know it keeps coming up, and I'm pleased that now we have a formal owner of cyber security in the Seagrey universe, so excellent. And just in the last week, one of our colleagues has come and said, actually, maybe a real focus of this should be around the DER and the cybersecurity impacts of DER, because our largest power stations now are spread across 1 million rooftops. And if they all have a common mode vulnerability that gets exploited, we're in possibly a big world of hurt. One of the other topics that is of interest, certainly amongst the Australian panel, is the proliferation of special protection schemes and how we keep a handle on what are they all doing, how do they interact with each other, how do we model them. And a couple of us were talking earlier today about a power system incident from a couple of years ago, and one of the things that happened, and as soon as I heard about this incident,